Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Father Michael McGivney, he's been beatified, and since his beatification I would say about 5 years ago now, we have seen a significant rise in the amount of prayers that are attributed to his intercession and therefore being answered. He's the founder of the Knights of Columbus. He was beatified 5 years ago on October the 31st. And knights and their families all throughout the world are devoted to him, and they've been praying fervently for his canonization. Joining me to talk about this prolific and important man in the life of the modern church is Brian Caulfield. Brian is the vice postulator for the Sainthood cause of Blessed Michael McGivney. Brian, great to speak with you. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Today's the feast day of Father McGivney.
Yeah, and therefore I just wanted to have this conversation with you. Wanted to begin by asking you to share just about the background of this amazing man and why what he did was so necessary.
Yeah, well, Father McGivney was a first-generation American. Both his parents were born in Ireland. They came over actually separately, during the potato famine in the 1850s. Came over to Connecticut in the U.S., and they met in Waterbury, which was a very busy factory, commerce city at the time, and they married. And Michael was their first child of eventually 13 children. And it was, Patrick McGivney, his father, was a worker in one of the factories. He was an iron molder, a little bit cut above some of the workers in the factory, but they were all exposed to, the noxious fumes and the dangerous conditions. So Michael McGivney grew up in this environment where he was the eldest of 13. 6 of his siblings died either, stillborn or in early childhood. So he really, developed a heart for the working man through his father, developed a heart for the hardship of the immigrant, through the loss of his own siblings. And this really shaped his character as one with very great determination, hardworking, but also, with a heart open to the trials and tribulations of, mainly the Irish immigrant of his day. And when he finally heard the calling to be a priest, his father actually forbade him. He was age 13. He wanted to start preparing for the seminary. His pastor, Father Hendricken, was very much in favor of it. But Mr. McGivney, very common at the time, said, "You're the oldest boy. You have to, work to help support the family." So young Michael, at age 13, he had finished school, went to work in a spoon factory in Waterbury. So both he and his father were factory workers. Here also, obviously, Michael developed that great sympathy and fellowship and solidarity with the working man. Finally, at age 16, the pastor finally prevailed upon Mr. McGivney to, I imagine, being Irish descent myself, kind of saying, well, Mr. McGivney, you wouldn't want to face St. Peter, at your death and say your son was tonight, going to seminary. So Mr. McGivney relented, and fortunately, for all of us, for the church itself, for obviously the Knights of Columbus, for our 2 million members and their families throughout the world. And so, Michael went to seminary. He finally, his father died when he was in seminary. He thought he would have to come home and continue working. Again, now they have, many children at home, and his father died at age 48 when Michael was 20. So, he thought he would have to come back to Waterbury, but the Bishop of Hartford in Connecticut got word that his prize seminarian was thinking of dropping out, and he offered him a scholarship to go to St. Mary's in Baltimore, the first Catholic seminary in the U.S. And there Michael excelled. He was sacristan. He did well in the studies. And the rector at the time, when it was time for his ordination, wrote something in his record, which is kind of interesting. And he wrote that, he's a good young man. He'll do well in the ministry. but he's a little bit soft-headed. We don't really know what that means. But then he adds, usque ad lacrimas, which means even unto tears. So evidently, Michael might have had the gift of tears, which some saints speak of, like St. Ignatius and others. The presence of God or the presence of suffering would move his heart so much. He was assigned to St. Mary's in New Haven, Connecticut. Again, that was a busy harbor, a busy port city at the time. Also the place of Yale University up to this day. And just to give you an example of the anti-Catholic prejudice at the time, we have the Know Nothing movement. We have many Masonic organizations, obviously anti-Catholic. And so St. Mary's, they built the church on Hill House Avenue, which is right on the outskirts of, the prestigious Yale University campus. And the New York Times, of all things, ran an article saying, how a Catholic edifice, has pretty much spoiled the, a great avenue of Hill House Avenue where all the best people live, and Yale University is there. And not only that, but, the church is in debt, which I guess to the, Protestant work ethic was a sin worse than, than apostasy or whatever, or heresy. It was in debt. In other words, they didn't know how to run a business. So that was the kind of prejudice. And, of course, this was a day when employers would put in their windows, help wanted, Irish need not apply, which also meant Catholic need not apply. Mm-hmm. So this was the environment he grew up in. He was the assistant pastor, curate, as they called it in those days. And he saw the need of his people, working in the parish. And he saw a lot of, like his own father, a lot of the breadwinners, in the factories, on the railroads, in the mines, injuring or early death. And, the widow with many children facing really bankruptcy in many instances. So, it was an age of many fraternal benefit societies, some of them Catholic, but, none of them really successful. So he wrote that he wanted to start a fraternal benefit society according to Catholic principles that would have equal or better benefits than these other secret societies, as they called them. And a bunch of men, he sent out word in New Haven, the go-ahead men of New Haven, as he called them, men, despite all the anti-Catholicism, were getting ahead in society as lawyers or police constables or, politicians. They were rousing up the Irish vote. And so these are the men who came to his first meeting. And they all said, we should do this. Some of these were veterans of the Civil War. Imagine that. That kind of places us in historical context. 1881, 1882. So it's, really just 20 years, less than 20 years after the end of the Civil War. So we're talking about, really experienced, hardened men who had gone through life experience. And the amazing thing to me and many others is that at this first meeting, and he made it clear, McGivney made it clear that this would be a lay organization. At the end of this first meeting, they asked Father McGivney to be, in a sense, what we call today the Supreme Knight, to be the head of the organization. And in his humility and in his plan for this organization, he said, no, that's not what I had at all in mind. But look at this. I mean, these are 30, 40-year-old men. He was a 28-year-old, junior priest, really, only 7 years in ministry. So there's something about Father McGivney in his day and even today that really attracts people. They see his leadership qualities, and it wasn't a bombastic, it was a very quiet, but they could see that he got things done. He got things done because he always followed the prompting of the Holy Spirit, the will of God, and he was tireless in his work in this area. So from that small beginning...
let's pause there, Brian. The music is hitting, but we're going to continue on the other side of the break. Brian Caulfield is talking with us about Blessed Michael McGivney. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm talking with Brian Caulfield, Vice Postulator for the Sainthood cause for Blessed Michael McGivney. Now, Brian, we got interrupted at the break, but before I have you continue about him being made Supreme Knight and in his humility, his response from there, one of the things I want to point out that many of our listeners will not know is, like you mentioned, today is the feast day, and this feast day is neither his birthday nor his day of death, which is typically either one of those becomes the declared feast day of the church for that particular saint. Whatever you could share with us why it is that it's today.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and as you can tell, once I start talking about Father McGivney, it's one of my favorite topics, obviously. Mm-hmm. So, yes, when he came up to beatification, of course, the Vatican worked with the Knights of Columbus to try to pick a feast day. And we realized that, he was born on August 12th, 1852, and he died 2 days past his 38th birthday on August 14th, 1890. And it was really the Vatican that came up with the notion of why don't we place his feast day between those 2 days. And, fortuitously, now we have what we call, the McGivney 3 days or 3 days of McGivney, or kind of in quotes, the Triduum of Father McGivney, the August 12th, 13th, and 14th. And obviously the 13th being his feast day, which, we're speaking now on this day, and there's a special mass today at St. Mary's where he founded the Knights of Columbus in New Haven. And so his memory and his works, especially his works, the miracle that was approved for his beatification, and now the many, many favors we receive, some of them just really extraordinary through his intercession. Hopefully, we're looking toward that canonization. No details or no specific date, but we urge people to continue praying, continue reporting any favors, and the Father McGivney Guild, which I oversee. We really, of course, we would love that that report of I was blind and now I see kind of thing, but we really cherish and relish the everyday favors because I think it tells so much about the character of Father McGivney, who was really a priest of the everyday. He was a parish priest. He worked, himself literally to death in parish work. He was 7 years at St. Mary's as assistant, and then he was made a pastor of a town called Thomaston, about 25 miles away from New Haven. And another, I always point out his humility in when he was appointed pastor, total obedience to the bishop. He didn't say, oh, I'm this important person, who founded the Knights of Columbus. No, he went the 25 miles in those days, the horse and buggy, or maybe the train. It was quite a distance. And he did not bring, the Supreme Council, so to speak, all the records and all the meetings to where he was. He put it upon himself to go to the meetings himself in New Haven. The headquarters and the meetings remained in New Haven, all the books and everything, because he recognized, once he became pastor, that he had, that other obligation, his first obligation really, to his people as a pastor of a parish.
Brian, one of the things that I want to ask you to speak to is why specifically the Knights of Columbus as well. I know you had begun alluding to that, but there was a particular drive there.
Yeah, well, Columbus, we may not think of it today, given all the wokeness, but yeah, Columbus in that day, in the 1880s, he was a revered figure for all Americans, Catholic, Protestant, everyone. He was a worldwide heroic figure. And so they chose Columbus as their patron, kind of to just say, Protestants are ascendant in America at this time, but, Columbus reminds us that the founding, that the first explorer was a Catholic, and he sailed for Catholic Spain. He planted, the Catholic faith here. So that was one way. And Father McGivney wanted to call the organization the Sons of Columbus, but actually James Mullen, who became the first Supreme Knight, and he was a he was a veteran of the Civil War. He was a police constable. And he said, no, Father, we are already sons, we want to be knights. We want to be, that figure that sacrifices, for the church, that fights, spiritually, for the church. And, we want the regalia, and we want, this kind of, going through the process of becoming a first, second, or third degree knight. So, Father McGivney said, okay, men, this is your organization. We'll call ourselves the Knights of Columbus.
Share with us now, given that, right? Share with us the kind of very clear male spirituality that is embodied by the Knights of Columbus. This concept that we're not out there fighting humongous battles that are won by blood and weapons, but the kind of battle the Knights of Columbus are engaging in is infinitely greater because it's about souls, it's about marriages, it's about families, and it's about raising boys to become virtuous men.
Yes, well, in one of his letters, founding letters, Father McGivney said we want to keep men close to the Catholic faith because some of them were leaving in order to join, the Protestant secret societies because of the benefits for their families. So he didn't blame them. It's not like he said, oh, you're anathema. He said, we have to give them something so that they will stay. Mm-hmm. And that's also the genius of Father McGivney. It's like, don't curse the people, you should be guiding, and they have good intentions, so let's bring them back. So that was one of his motivations. And of course, there's been, over the years, enormous, today the Knights really are known for their charity. In the last 10 years, we've kind of stressed so much that charity has to be sort of the step maiden of the faith, right? We don't want to be an NGO, or we don't want to be, just a charitable organization. We want our charity to flow from the heart of our faith. And right now, today, we have what we call CORE, COR, the Latin for heart. Mm-hmm. And it's a CORE program where men get together, they can discuss their faith, they have formation programs, and it's really growing by leaps and bounds throughout the order because men are starving, I think, today for that kind of fellowship, that kind of connection, in this age of digital connection, which are really not, good connections many times. The Knights are stressing face-to-face, person-to-person, brother sharpening, sharpening brother in the faith, brother helping, lifting up brother in the faith. And then from that experience of charity in their hearts, then they have charity for others. And, we just had our Supreme Convention, and, sometimes I'm even amazed at the works that are reported, between the Coats for Kids, the Foods for Family, the ultrasound initiative. We placed more than 2,000 ultrasounds in pro-life pregnancy centers over the years, saving countless unborn babies, who now, bear the name sometimes of the Knights that helped, fund that. So the charity of the Knights, and any man over 18 years of age, Catholic man who's a practicing Catholic, is welcome to join. And also urged to join the Father McGivney Guild. That's the official organization promoting the cause. And just go to fathermcgivney.org, and you will see area to sign up. It's free. You would be remembered in the weekly Mass offered by our priest for all Guild members and all their intentions. You go to the website, you'll see a big button that says, submit your prayer intentions. And then another one says, report your favors. That's really what we're focusing on now, because we need that one more miracle through the intercession of Father McGivney to bring him to canonization. So I always tell people, you join the Guild, you become part of the cause in a very real way.
Can you share with us maybe at least one of the stories that we know has been attributed to his intercession?
Yeah, well, maybe some of your listeners aren't familiar with the first miracle. It was an unborn baby in the womb. It was a family in Tennessee. The father was a knight, actually an insurance agent for the Knights of Columbus. And, Michelle, this was the 13th child, very open to life. And they got a diagnosis first of Down syndrome. And in Vanderbilt Hospital, they advised or offered abortion, and of course they turned it down. And then another diagnosis a few weeks later, which was the fatal one, which was fetal hydrops, where 2 or more organs of the unborn baby filled with fluid, and there's no treatment, there's no therapy. It's just it might resolve, but most times it doesn't. And so they prayed to Father McGivney. They knew he needed a miracle. They advised all their friends, all their knights, and this went throughout the country. This pray for the Shackle baby. Their name was Daniel and Michelle Shackle. And long story short, when Michelle went in for a ultrasound, the doctor said, "I don't see any hydrops here." And wow! And they said, "Is that so?" The boy was born 2015 without hydrops. He still had Down syndrome. And I remember sitting with Daniel and Michelle as vice postulator, saying, "Well, we send this to the Vatican, and they're going to say, okay, you sealed up one, but what about the Down syndrome?" And they looked at me like I had 2 heads, and they said, "Well, we never prayed to take away the Down syndrome. We considered that God's will, and we accept that life. And we know other families who have Down syndrome children, and all they can do is give love and receive love, and they're like the cherished member of the family." Little Mikey, we call him Miracle Mikey, is now 11 years old, and just as they said, he's the cherished member of the family. It's a large family. Mikey brings them all together in love. So yeah, we're going to have to stop there, but that was a beautiful place to end. I've been talking with Brian Caulfield, Vice Postulator for the Sainthood Cause of Blessed Michael McGivney. All the links will be in the description of today's program. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.